All right, folks, welcome to the Coffee Break Podcast. Our mission here is to share business practices, ideas, strategies, and lots more while we enjoy our coffee break. I'm Chad Lingefeld here with Loc-Doc Security. Today's guest is going to be Andy Hummel with Assa Abloy. But before we get into all that, Chris, hit that intro for us.
We got so much to say. We got a podcast to make. We're sipping on lattes, and it's time for a coffee break. It's time for a coffee break. Oh, yeah.
All right, welcome back. Today we are episode 7. Our guest today is Andy Hummel from Assa Abloy in Medico. How are you doing, Andy?
I'm good, man. Good morning. Good to see
Thanks
you.
for taking
Happy
time
New
out of
Year.
your schedule. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Moving along, and we're having a lot of fun doing this Coffee Break podcast. And we've been chatting back and forth, which we've known each other for a while now. But I don't know, a couple of weeks back, we were talking like, hey, you should come on the podcast. Let's chat about some stuff. And so I'm glad that the schedule's aligned and that we have some time to sit down and chat about some really fun stuff today. Before we get into all of the kind of nuts and bolts about what we're going to do, this is a new topic a new segment that we've been trying out on the podcast. It's five fast questions, like rapid fire.
Uh-oh.
Are you
didn't
ready?
tell me about this.
I know.
This is a surprise. Okay.
So
game.
five quick questions. First thing that comes to your mind. What's the last song that you listened to?
Neon. What is it? Something by Garth Brooks. I forget what it's called.
Neon something by Garth Brooks.
I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah, it was more. I was actually listening to a No Laying Up podcast on my way over here. It's a golf podcast. So
okay.
Not really a
so
song.
The last thing you were listening to was a podcast.
A podcast before the podcast.
Yeah. Ooh.
See,
pre-gaming. I got you.
That's right.
All right. Second one. Do you Instagram your food?
Yes.
You do.
Sometimes, depending on what it is. But I have before, especially when I grill out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You definitely have to do that.
Steaks or.
Number 3. What's your favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Friday. Why?
Get the weekend started.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. Would you rather have invisibility or a super strength?
Invisibility.
Why?
Because you could probably do whatever you wanted, and nobody
and you wouldn't need a super strength.
And you wouldn't need a super strength. Yeah, no one would know about it.
Fair. All right, last one. How many cups of coffee do you drink a day?
3.
3.
Yep.
Every single day.
Usually
or average.
Usually every day, but all in the morning. I have obviously a cup of coffee now.
Yeah.
Delicious home brew by Loc-Doc. But usually just in the morning. Nothing in the afternoon. I'm a morning coffee guy.
Really?
Yep.
See, I think I could probably hit about 3 cups of coffee by about 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's just the warm up.
If I have too much, I just don't feel very good.
Yeah.
So
if I don't have enough. Yeah. Anyways, cool. Well, thanks for participating in our rapid fire. That was fun.
Good to be here.
Learn a little more about you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I wanted to talk today, I guess before we get into all of the topics of discussion, I know I've said that 3 times now, but let's, by way of introduction, give us a little bit of your background, where you came from, and kind of your involvement with Assa Abloy from a big picture standpoint.
Sure. So I work obviously for Assa Abloy, specifically with Medico security locks. And I've been with Medico now for, it's actually 6 years this month. So
awesome.
Actually flown by, which is crazy. But my role with Medico is I essentially have responsibility for all of our mechanical products and our electronic products, or our intelligent keys, electronic cylinders, for really the mid-Atlantic part of the U.S. in a sales capacity.
Gotcha.
So our job is to get out there and obviously meet with customers like yourself and end users and all sorts of vertical markets, and work with our different Assa Abloy sales teams to drive as much Medico growth and sales as we can.
So mid-Atlantic area,
right?
So there's multiples of you throughout the country?
There are 5 of us throughout the country.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. I think that'll play into some of the conversation that I want to get into from a topic discussion. But so you've got a lot of peers that you're working with. what are some? So your ideal customer, because you work with dealers as well as end users,
Right.
correct? What does that look like on a day-to-day basis? How you're communicating and dealing with your customer base?
Yeah, so really, we try to be out in the field as much as possible. Our goal is to really be sitting down with end users, talking to them about what Medico is, what we can do for them on a security need, whether it's upgrading from existing mechanical into more electronic, or it's upgrading from what they currently have on a mechanical basis to more of a patented high security type technology.
Gotcha.
So a lot of our meetings are more with end users, but obviously we have some great channel partners like yourself who we drive that end user to, because we don't sell direct to end users. We sell we sell everything through distribution. So obviously the relationship we have with people like Loc-Doc and among others is obviously very important, because we can combine everybody into kind of one package,
Sure,
if you will.
So back in season 1, early on, and I don't remember which episode it was, but we had one of your colleagues on, Chris Sweeney, and which he's a friend of all of ours, and we like to joke with him a lot. But we were just talking about him before we got started. But anyways, we were talking about the importance of vendor relations and how it's important for us to maintain a good relationship with Assa Abloy, Medico specifically, but in the reverse of how you guys are maintaining a relationship with us to benefit the end user, to support the end user, and realizing that having that trust factor from from manufacturer to dealer to end user is a really important kind of three-way juncture that you have to maintain going forward. So I should probably know which episode that is, but that's one that is, I think, relevant to go back and listen to when you talk about that. That's not really the direction that I want to get into today, but I just think it's pretty interesting and important as far as all of the stuff that we work with together.
Yep.
I know specifically from my standpoint, Andy's been awesome to deal with from a manufacturer representation perspective, because he's one of these guys that always is following through and really just has the ability to help problem solve on a vast array of different issues. If it's dealing with deadlines, timelines, and or just saying, hey, Andy, we've got this big situation here, this big opportunity here, or whatever. Can you be here and be available? And you've always been really awesome to be able to do that, which is a big factor for us when we're talking about vendor selection, right?
Sure.
It's the people that you're choosing to work with and being intentional about that. Well, anyway, so let's get back into this. This is the kind of topic that I wanted to get into today, talking about KPIs and metrics, and it's very interesting to me. And I wanted to kind of set it up by this. We've been a part of the Medico Security Center program since 2009, 2010, really kind of getting involved with it. And one of the really neat aspects, one of the really big things that has been valuable to us as an organization is to be able to, I don't want to sit at the same table as a company like Assa Abloy and kind of see how you guys communicate information out. Learn the good, learn the bad, right? But learn how we can take that and apply it in our own organization. And this is one of the things that I've seen, I want to say, exemplified in Assa Abloy, that we've taken keys from, no pun intended.
Yeah, there you go.
Taken tips from and applied it into our business. Understanding how to communicate KPIs and metrics into our organization. So I guess set that up for us from an outside sales perspective, from somebody that you guys have this organization that's got 300 or 400 salespeople out in the entire country.
Right. Yeah.
How you're communicating and keeping everybody on the same page, it's always an interesting thing to me. So kind of talk a little bit about that and how it relates to key performance indicators and metrics and how you keep up with that.
Yeah. So as you said, so Assa Abloy is a very big, it's a machine, right? It's a very big organization. And so from a sales perspective, there's, hundreds of Assa Abloy sales guys running around, going and calling on schools, airports, utility companies, you name it, they're out there calling on dealers, what have you. But where we can actually concentrate in terms of on the Medico side is, we're just responsible, at least for myself, just responsible for Medico.
Yeah.
not any other brands Assa Abloy has, just medical as a whole. So, really for us, obviously key performance indicators for us are things like, what are brand new sales? We obviously track new sales, monthly sales growth, quarterly sales growth, hitting specific forecasts. And then from there, it's, what are the key initiatives behind that to hit those different different KPIs?
Yeah.
And so, we've got like you said before, there's 5 of me, if you will, across the country. And so our job is to work with the different Assa Abloy sales territories to help drive that growth within Medico. But really, it's our responsibility to get them the right information that they need for those different initiatives. So
let's take, this is fun. These are types of conversations that I love because I feel like this type of information here is what separates the good from the great in terms of small businesses. The ones that can grasp a hold of this and really build on it versus the ones that can't really apply it. Okay. So how can you take that from a large corporate perspective? Because a lot of what you just said is very, all right, we have an end goal that we're trying to get to, and these are the specifics that we're trying to break it down. Because if memory serves correctly, and I don't know what 2018 was for Assa Abloy, I haven't heard those numbers yet, but I remember back in 2017 it was a $9 billion sales organization. Taking $9 billion and breaking it down into Andy's territory.
Right.
Of one brand is wild. Okay. And so you talk about it in a small business aspect, and you've got whatever your annual revenue is as a small business, and then you have to break it down into what is applicable for each person in your organization. For us, our technicians, our sales folks, our purchasing department, whatever, we have to figure out what those key performance indicators are, those KPIs that relate to them, relevant to the big picture. And so it's a very scalable thing, but like I said, it's one of the kind of tips and tricks that I learned from Assa Abloy and said, okay, how can we scale it down to where we are and get people in the same boat? So with that said, some of your key performance indicators, how are you measuring those? How frequently are you doing this? Is this something quarterly, monthly? What's the frequency and importance of it to you and for your organization? Yeah,
so every Friday afternoon, our sales team gets together for an hour and a half call.
Okay.
And so we go over what current numbers are for each of our territories for the month, what they are for the year, what the top 5 business drivers are.
Okay.
That we're currently working on, what our activities are, and then obviously we also focus on where can we do better. Obviously you have the always improving hashtag, always improving, but obviously we want to figure out what we need to do better too, because obviously nobody's perfect. And so we do that every single Friday.
Okay.
So we're all on the phone together. We take turns. We go through what our weekly report, kind of give a summary of it. And so we can all see across the country what people are doing.
Sure.
And then we can obviously learn from each other.
And that's your direct group of the 5 that you're working with. Let me ask you a question on that, because that's very interesting. We started a sales huddle. We do ours on Tuesday morning, and one of the things that's very interesting to me is timeline and intentionality. So you do yours on Friday afternoon. What benefits do you gain from it on Friday afternoon versus, say, doing it on a Monday morning or a Wednesday or a Tuesday?
I don't like Friday afternoons. It's the worst time. I don't recommend ever having a sales call on a Friday afternoon, because at the end of the week you're just like, you don't really want to do it. But for our group, it works because we're all moving in complete opposite directions all week long. We used to have them on Monday mornings. People were traveling on Monday mornings.
On an airplane.
Half the calls were getting canceled because only 2 people could show up, so why have a call?
Yeah.
So it was one of those things where, you know what, guys, nobody wants a Friday afternoon call, but we're all back most of the time in an office or somewhere we can actually participate.
So the high percentage of participation overruled maybe a convenience or logistics on that's very interesting. And without getting into the nitty gritty and the secrets behind the conversations, is you said activity. So you're talking about the customers that you're dealing with, the dealers and the end users that you're dealing with, potential upcoming projects and stuff like that.
Yep.
So it's a conversation to know, hey, I'm working here on this stuff in the Mid-Atlantic, and the guys out on the West Coast are working on this.
Right.
Where are these paths crossing? Where are they conflicting? Those types of conversations.
Correct.
Do you have any examples or any, like, maybe not specific examples, but where that has really kind of saved you from? Because we're big here on one of our core values is consistent communication, and a sales call, a sales huddle, whatever, is an example of that. It's being consistent in our communication for those reasons of preventing overlap, or hey, or three of us are working on this same thing simultaneously, but neither one of us knew about it. Have you guys dealt with any of that, and what have you seen the benefit from?
Yeah, so on every call, someone does bring up something that's obviously of value that could be new. And even this last Friday, one of our teammates brought up something about one of our mechanical products, and we were all like, "Oh, we had no idea that we had a patent that's being extended to 2030, Medico X4. You probably had no idea either until I just told you."
Interesting.
So the United States Patent Office has officially extended Medico's X4 patent to the year 2030.
Wow.
So one of our guys brought that up, and I was like,
that'd have been good information to know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And so I confirmed it with a few people, and sure enough, yeah, it is, which could be a big deal.
Sure.
So things like that, come up. But really what I like to see is, we all deal in so many different vertical markets.
Yeah.
And out on the West Coast, they could be having a ton of success with a certain product on the education realm. Well, over on the East Coast, we're not having that success. So what are they doing out there that could possibly benefit us here? Is it just more of it's a West Coast thing, and it doesn't make any sense because of different code or whatever? Or is it something that they're doing on the sales side that could really benefit us?
Sure. That
we haven't even thought about yet.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of different scenarios play out that way.
A sales call like that for you, is that a very, because this is something that, for my sake, and trying to learn how much of it is a structured agenda? This is the order that we're going to discuss everything. This stuff happens every single week. How much is it of a free flow of, oh yeah, Bob has this information he wants to share this week? Like what is that, and then who moderates it? It's
structured. So we're a part. So the regional Medico guys, we are a part. Or I guess really Medico in general is a part of what's called the Electromechanical High Security Aftermarket Group, right? So we're also mixed in with brands HES, Securitron, Adams Wright, and Alarm Controls.
Okay.
And all of that is kind of headquartered and done out of Phoenix, out of an Assa Abloy location in Phoenix, Arizona. So within that group, there's a guy who's the VP of sales for that organization. So he's moderating everything that we're doing.
Gotcha.
But it's the same type of flow. We all have our own weekly reports.
Yeah.
It goes to me, I do mine, and then obviously questions and whatever, and then it goes to the next guy, and he does his. But we can all chime in with questions or comments or things like that, depending on.
So you each share kind of around the virtual table, so to speak,
mm-hmm.
and that's your one kind of sales call for that group. Now, are you involved in any other regular meetings of communication throughout the week, or is that the only one?
So for our team, that's the formalized call in terms of your sales stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But obviously, there's calls throughout the week with different topics or different initiatives that are being brought up that people have to present. Obviously, those come out, project calls.
Side note on all of this, and then we'll come back into the KPIs and metrics. What's your biggest pet peeve of conference calls and web conferences? What's the way to make them better?
There's too many of them.
There's too many?
Well, and you don't need a call for everything.
Yeah.
There's just
trying to determine what is relevant to be on a call versus email.
Most of them could be half the time that they take.
Yeah. I a lot of the ones that I don't want to talk a lot about what we do here from that, because it's there. Everything needs improvement. But for some of the ones that we've been involved with outside perspective, it's a lot of sit and wait for everybody to get there type call, and then the actual nuts and bolts of the conversation is like 4.5 minutes, and then but you've slotted out an entire hour of a call. Anyway, let's get back to the KPIs and metrics. So you're utilizing a conference call, so to speak, because you're spread out over the whole country to communicate it, but you're focusing on certain numbers to know if you're meeting the expectations that have been set. Right. So how are you? What are some things that you guys have learned through that process of things that you need to get better at, or how it's brought attention to certain things? Hey, we know we're low here, or we know we're high here. Like, how does it benefit, and why is it important to have them, especially when you're spread out so far? I know that was like 5 questions all in one, but the relevancy of KPIs when you're talking, because I believe that they're valuable and important, but it's how do you know which ones to share and what the important factor is?
It's a very good question. At least I know things that I look at. A lot of it is, for me, product mix comes into play a lot. With Medico, we have mechanical products and we have electronic products. And within each of those realms, we've got different technologies within mechanical and different technologies within electronic.
Yeah.
So it's always good to be diversified.
Yeah.
Within your financial situation, it's good to be diversified with what is being put out the door too, and being shipped out to different customers. So I always like to look at like what the product mix is, especially for new opportunities that we're tracking.
Yeah.
In our pipelines, that usually gives me a good overview of, okay, this is something that, if all of a sudden, electronics weren't the flavor of the month, then we've got a ton of mechanical stuff going on too. So it wouldn't be a big deal.
Just trying to be mindful of everything that's kind of coming through the system.
Yep.
And then you're tracking that on like a year-to-date type.
Sure.
So
yeah.
So comparatively to other years.
Well, we track it more like month to month. So January of this year versus last year, February of this year versus last year.
Okay.
Because really for Medico, we start getting into the summer months, and our mechanical volume goes way up because of schools. It's a big time for schools to rekey and things like that. So we may have a lot more volume in certain things over the summer months, but then we get in October, November, December, and it may be just as much volume, but completely different products for completely different reasons. So we tend to try, okay, what was January of 19 like versus 2018?
Sure. And
compare those two, and then the same thing with what was February like for this year versus February of 2018, and compare those 2 months.
Gotcha. So year over year comparison is a big thing to focus on. And then, because like you said, I think a lot of, if not all businesses, right, they all track in different ways. Some have different quarters. For us, for years, October was a weird month. It was just always off. It was always slow. And we were trying to figure out why. Yeah. And asked a lot of questions, and finally figured out that a large amount of our customer base is yearly budget driven on a calendar year, and so they would take October and basically shut the valve off while they were reassessing for the last 2 months of the year.
Sure.
We never, for years, we couldn't figure it out. It was just like all of a sudden everything fell off in October, and then November and December it picked back up.
Right.
Just in the same, as soon as the calendar year flips over on January 1st, it's a whole different ballgame.
Right. Well, government is, we're obviously a big player. Medico's always been a big player in the government market. And, the federal government spends, at least when they open back up, hopefully by this episode they're opened up, right? But they spend most of their money in August and September.
Yeah.
So once that happens, it's like nothing.
Yeah. Well, so I think that's an interesting a metric maybe to keep in front of your organization is knowing how your customers spend, right? Because you base your whole company's goals and structures and all that stuff based off of certain things, and then your customers' spending habits don't align with it, and you've got an issue. So that's an interesting concept, is knowing your customer spending habits so that you can align your month-to-month goals. Because if you've got a high spend in those months, then the other ones you might have to adjust your goals for, because if your customers aren't spending money, you're never going to hit your goal unless you find other customers to fill that void.
Yep.
Interesting. What are some other things that you've seen throughout your career where KPIs or metrics have been a valuable asset to help kind of craft your initiatives, to help kind of craft, these are things that we need to be intentional with or focused on?
So electronics is really kind of where the industry is going as a whole.
Yeah.
So a lot of our KPI metrics are really involving stuff around electronics. And at least for Medico, with our Click and XT type products, we're seeing a lot more activity in places like utilities and solar and wind and water and places that we've never really done business with before. So really designing initiatives around those areas are really helping to, drive new customers in. And I know that we've done some work on the utility front, with you guys to bring customers to you, and then from talk about trust, hand it over and off to the races.
Yeah.
But that's really been an area that we've really been able to, hit different metrics on just new customers in general, from brand new market segments that up until a couple of years ago, we had no sales in, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that has been driven by different government regulations and security regulations that are, newer, if you will. And so that's obviously been beneficial to all of us, but we've really captured a lot of that growth.
So I think we have a few minutes left, and I just having this conversation, and I know you're a big golfer and a big golf fan.
Resolution for 2019. I will play more golf. But that was also a resolution for 2018 and 2017 as well.
It's one of those things that you could just always leave up there. But it just kind of hit me because, we talk about KPIs and metrics in the business world all the time. And maybe I'm off base here, but just because I watch a lot of golf, I watch a lot of sports as a whole, and it's funny because I've heard a lot of jokes about it here recently, where they come up with these crazy statistics of this is the most 3-pointers made in the last 2.5 minutes of games in this particular zip code in the last 20 years or whatever the case may be. Like, they dial it way in.
Made up stats.
Yeah, made up stats. In golf, though, you talk about especially in the PGA, they talk a lot of about their average putts per hole, and they measure the toughest hole on the course through a tournament based off of the average scores. Those are all key performance indicators. They're all metrics that really make sense and really apply to the golfers as they're out there, and it's something that they're tracking, and it helps them to figure out their strategies. One of the things, and I'll let you kind of share your thoughts on it as well, but listening to Jordan Spieth specifically talk about over the last couple of years how they come out with a game plan, right? And it was so, like, the first couple times I heard him talk about it, it sounded so foreign to me from a golf perspective, but I like to take these things in any analogy and flip it back into business, because that's just kind of the natural flow that I have. But he says, hey, we went out with a plan and we said, you know what, we think that we can win this tournament if we have X amount of pars and X amount of birdies, and we know we're going to have a few bogeys. Like, we know that those are going to be in there, but we think that if we can make it up on this, and this hole, then we have a good strategy to win. Share your thoughts on that from a planning perspective, from a simplicity of that golf game to taking it over to business. But in all actuality, that's their business, right?
Yeah.
They're professional golfers. That's how they have to plot out their course.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that, and how they're using those types of key performance indicators in their business?
Yeah. So for us, we've got, and I mentioned this before, a few new markets that we've never really done a lot of business in before. And, I'm like, if we can do X% in, market A, market B, and market C, we're going to blow our forecast out of the water. Yeah. Because it's brand new revenue, it's brand new growth, it's untapped, and there's so much out there that's available that we can do, we can make eagle, and then a whole bunch of pars and shoot that 64, 63, 62, no problem, and bolt up that leaderboard, if you will. Whereas, Jordan Spieth really the guy you got to listen to is Bryson DeChambeau.
Yeah.
You know, he'll make your head spin with coefficients of restitution and all the other stuff he talks about. But no, it's the same thing. You know, you get hot in a couple areas, and it can make or break what you're wanting to do.
So essentially, you know, what it comes down to from my thought process here is you're taking a large goal maybe and breaking it down into tangible, tactical things.
Right.
So, you know, the end goal is to win this tournament. I think I can win this tournament by hitting these scores on each of these 4 rounds. And to hit these scores in each of these 4 rounds, I need to do this on each hole. And so that's why they're tracking, you know, they're tracking each hole as we're tracking each week or each month.
Right.
In each round, in each quarter, and so forth.
Yep.
And it's just an interesting thing that I think from a small business perspective, if we can all get our heads wrapped around the big goal, the big thing that we're trying to work towards, but not overlooking the small things like, yeah, we want to do this amount of revenue in this month, but what does that mean per week and day?
Right.
But even more detailed into that is by what category. You know, that means we need to do this many service calls, or that means we need to sell this many widgets, or that means we need to reduce this amount of expense, or whatever it is.
Yep.
But coming up with the tactical and tangible, other than just, hey, here's a big number that we want to try to shoot for, and really no actionable game plan.
Right.
Which brings us back around to the initial concept of the KPIs and metrics. It tells you during the entire process, that's what you guys are doing on that Friday call, is you're making sure that you're keeping that focus in front of you. And if it gets a little off track, then you can
That's right.
course correct in a week versus a year.
Exactly.
It's a harder thing to course correct on. Very interesting. Any other thoughts on the subject?
No, one other thing that we do is obviously a big thing for us is when we're putting forecasts together is looking at, you know, what are, for the past year, what's the average daily sale in the territory? And then, you know, will that hit the forecast? Probably not. So what else is needed for that? And then, you know, essentially what do you need per day to hit your forecast? And, you know, track that. Really, you know, we get sales reports shot to us every single day. So we can look it up real quickly and see if we're on track, if we're ahead, if we're behind, and make adjustments.
Well, and I think one of the big things that one of the takeaways that I got from everything that we talked about today was really dialing in on the different categories, right? So different markets, verticals, or regional markets, whatever. If we can tweak it a few percentage points here, then it's going to have a big impact on the whole, rather than just trying to go shoot for a number, but really getting dialed into the specifics on it.
Exactly.
Cool. Andy, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's been very insightful, and hopefully it's been some valuable information for our listeners. If this is your first time listening to the podcast because Andy posted this on his Facebook and everybody has swarmed to it, I want to remind you that we have a full season of over 20 episodes on our website, and many more episodes to come. We've got a really exciting year plotted out for us. So if you're listening for the first time, make sure you subscribe so you can stay updated. We release a new episode every single Tuesday, and we record this live every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcast, and a lot of other places. So check that out. It's Loc-Doc.net/podcast for more information there. And other than that, we will see you next time right here on The Coffee Break.